Hello and welcome to the AgCulture Podcast, where we cultivate tomorrow by inspiring agripreneurs and ag innovators through real-life perspectives in agriculture. I'm Paul Windemuller, your host on this journey of exploration and growth. On today's episode, I interview Peter Templeton, who comes all the way to my dairy farm from the southern tip of the South Island of New Zealand. That's where Peter Dairy farms alongside of his family, and they have a unique setup that we're going to discuss in today's conversation, mostly around succession. Peter is also a Nuffield Scholar. He's a fellow Nuffield Scholar. I traveled with him for about 6 weeks this year. We got to know each other very well and became friends. And Peter has been on the road now. By the time this airs, he will be back in New Zealand, but he has been gone from his farm for about 6 months this year so far. So he's been traveling the world, learning a lot, talking to a lot of people in a lot of different countries about the idea and the challenge of succession. One thing I really appreciate about Peter is he's willing to get into some details and some things that most people wouldn't really be willing to talk about in a succession planning strategy. So I really hope if you're in this stage of your career or your business that you listen closely to this episode. I think you'll gain a lot of interesting insights into the whole concept of succession planning. So without further ado, here's today's episode with Peter Templeton. Hey everyone, before we get started with today's episode, I just wanted to take a second to thank our sponsors, Bank Barn. I love these guys and what they're doing to streamline banking in agriculture. They're helping to connect farmers and lenders so that today's farmers have more options no matter the size of operation. Check out bankbarn.io to learn more. Peter Templeton, welcome to the AgCulture Podcast today. I had the pleasure of spending 6 weeks with Peter traveling around the world as part of our Nuffield travels. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much, Paul. I also had the pleasure of spending 6 weeks traveling around the world with you. And the fact that we're still sitting here in this room is a testament to the guy, the person behind the podcast. Awesome experience, awesome opportunity to question the world and what we were seeing and have proper debates about it. Often take the opposite side of a conversation, argue the counterpoint because it needed to be said. So I appreciated that trip.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to digging up some of the nuggets that we both learned along the way on that trip. And also, you've been traveling since February. We're now, Peter is at my farm visiting with me and my family for the couple of days here. And got a chance to sit down together. So we're doing that to kind of give a recap to the 5 months of travel that you've done.
Yeah, and this is pretty much, I think I'm 162 days traveling so far or something along those lines. And this is pretty much the very end of my travels. So I'm about 3 or 4 days from going home of the majority of the bulk part of my travel. And it's just been a really eye-opening experience, just trying to put it into words about how much I've seen and how much you try and challenges your thinking and your frame of mind. It's been really, really awesome. And I definitely think that this will change my farming career forever in some format. I think it will be different. So.
Yeah. Well, why don't you give us a little bit of background to the audience of where you come from, what type of farming enterprise that you run, and a little bit of your background.
Right. I'll try and do the famous 2-minute intro, which takes 25 minutes. So, right. So I'm a farmer from the very south coast of Southland in New Zealand. So I'm a 5th-generation farmer. Our family have been farming flax as an industry, which is like an aloe vera grass, which we used to strip back the fiber and make it into rope. That was initially what we did. We went sheep and beef, and now we've gone to dairy farming since 2002. So I came into the family farm as a working aspect of it, full-time working from 2016. And yeah, basically our farm has always changed and moved with the times. When the dairy farming thing got really good in New Zealand, we sort of got into the industry and been there ever since. And I don't know if that's where we're going to stay. It just, we sort of, the aspect of the farm, it sort of rotates. It follows the trends, follows the market.
Yeah, and your topic that you're studying for Nuffield is based off of the experience that you've had personally, correct?
Yeah. So
you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Sure can do. So my Nuffield topic is basically I'm asking a very open question, which is, does ownership structure have an effect on the farm's ability to change and develop and ultimately succeed? So there's three aspects to that I'm really interested in. The first aspect is corporate farming models. They're moving into my country in a lot more speed and veracity in terms of they're buying a lot of land. So I really want to understand that model, how it works, how people can develop within that industry. So how you can get good managers to turn into farm owners within the future. The second part is family succession. How can we have more people wanting to come back into family farming and have more people owning, at the end goal, owning farmland? And the last sort of generation I've been looking at is what we call the first generation farmer. So someone who, like yourself, Paul, who hasn't come from farming in any format and can work their way into the industry. Now, from an outset, when I first set out on my merry way, the honest answer was I thought it was going to be super hard. And 5 months later, it still is super hard, but there's more hope out there than I think a lot of people see. They often see a huge capital price, so, an enormous capital amount of capital you have to spend to get into a farm. And the truth is, yes, but there are other ways into it, and there are other structures, and there are other things that can support people coming into the industry. So I have a lot more hope in that sense. So that's my topic. Without going too much into that, the reason that I've done this is so with a fifth generation family farm. In 2013, my parents, Vaughan and Megan, started having discussions with myself and my brother. There's only two boys. We decided to come back, and they decided to start having the conversation with us to come back into the family farm. In 2012, they decided to have this conversation with me personally, and it didn't go so well. It was the morning after my 21st birthday, so I wasn't feeling 100%. I'd had a pretty big night the night before. And it was the first time I'd been down home for about 6 months. So they decided, look, we've got to have this conversation. And they came to me and said, we want you to come to the farm. You're about to graduate university. We want you to come home and run the farm. And my answer was a very firm no. It didn't necessarily come in those exact words. It was a bit more flamboyant. The truth is that at that point, I was ready to go explore around my own country. And I had a very set plan to travel different parts of the country, pick up different aspects of New Zealand farming and bring it back down to my very unique climate and at that time was seen to be a very challenging place to dairy farm. So I wanted to bring a lot of different information and different skills and bring it home. So that didn't go very well in 2012. So I came back in 2013 in a much more formal setting with a farm succession advisor in hand. His name was Tony Hamilton, and he was awesome. He sat down with my parents for about a year saying to them, we need to get you sorted first. What do you want? What do you value within farm succession? And so he sat down with my mother and father for 12 months in particular. And the first, I think, it was 10 meetings or so that he had with them. He asked them three very simple questions, which is, what do you enjoy doing? What are your personal interests and hobbies? What do you enjoy? Where do you see yourself, individuals, farming, or where do you see yourself in 5 years? And the third one is, where do you see the farm in 25 years without the people? Like, we want you to view the farm separated from the people, and where do you see the farm as a vehicle? And he asked those questions over and over and over again, multiple times, until my parents finally were able to answer them. And it was a very challenging and confronting topic for them, because all they had ever known and all that had ever existed was within the farm. And they were being told to think about hobbies and interests and fun things outside of the farm. And my mother in particular really struggled with that and how to, I don't think she'd mind me saying that. She hopefully not, but she was, definitely very, didn't see it. And it's still something that we constantly talk about to today. So anyway, after that year of meetings that they went through, we came back into the farm in terms of we started having formal meetings. So first time we met was in a neutral place about 3 hours away from home. for us. So 3 hours away from the family farm, that was close to where we could all meet in a central zone. And we started having what I suppose was succession talks. And
this at this point, it was just you and your parents having those talks?
Myself, my brother, and my parents. So because my brother is about nearly 3 years older than me, he is very interested in, at that point, he was a very successful mechanical engineer. So he was running, what they call a projects engineer at Carter Holt Harvey, which is a very big pulp and paper mill for our country and a big business. And he was on a fast track towards success within a bigger scope of that business. And so us all being naive farming folk thought that he's got out of farming, he's got a better life for himself. This is great. And so we didn't associate him with wanting to come home. He'd never really formally said that he would want to come home. And so we started having these conversations. And the biggest plate dropping moment was when he said, I would like to come home and farm. Him as the older brother said instantly, I instantly thought that that meant that he was going to take over the family farm and I would have to go off farming in my own sense. And I thought that long term down the track, there'd be some capital come in it for me to help me into ownership down the track, but just to focus on continuing to build up skills, experience, and capital, building into my own farming venture, essentially becoming first generation in some format. The truth is that then after that first meeting settled down and everyone got a chance to say what they wanted to do, and I said that I wanted to farm on the family farm. He said he wanted to farm. Parents said, well, we want the farm to be available to do both of you, but we don't think we can afford to. That was sort of where the meeting went. We all went back off on our own ways for 2 months. And then we got called back into another meeting. And this time the parents talked and the parents sat down and talked about the history of the farm. So there's a three hour long meeting, that one, and an hour and a half of that was talking about the history of the farm in detail. Yeah. Who was there, what time, what was the farm as a vehicle? So what did the farm always accommodated for? Who was able to stay there? How many of the brothers had been able to work in the past and how it had gone. And that was very fascinating to us because even as kids, we didn't truly understand.
You might have heard bits and pieces of that story, but you never heard it all laid out at one go.
100%. And I think, that's one of the things that I think as kids, we all think we know everything. And the truth is, and it often hurts our pride more than anything, is that you don't.
Yeah.
But when you get to sit down in a formal setting and explain how it all works, they were always talking about the farm as a vehicle. And to me, I was 20. At this point, I just turned 22, and I was never even heard of this. The farm as a vehicle. What do you mean the farm's a vehicle? And they were talking about is the farm has the ability to bring both boys back on and do this. It always has. And the thing that's currently holding us back is the people within it and the pride and everything that was there. So part of that was talking about the history. Then the parents talked about what they wanted. And it was, we think the farm's big enough to support 2 boys. We think in order to do this, we need to borrow a bit more money, put on a second dairy unit, separate the dairy units and have the boys going off into their own separate businesses over time. And again, my parents are very stubborn in a very loving way. And they had a very particular vision, in particular my father. My mother really didn't believe it could work, but my father was dead keen on this and thought it could work. And so keep pushing, and ultimately we sort of left it there. And then a month later we came back and we sort of started having the conversation again, and it turned out over that month everybody had become more comfortable with that concept.
Okay.
Completely off on their own. So the truth is that every time it was something brand new and we didn't know how to process it. It was so much information, and then with time you sort of get your head around it. You understand how it will work. You understand the mechanism, and that the land can actually do it, and so on. So we came back, and this is the 3rd meeting within 6 months. And by this stage, it's about early 2013. We then made a soft plan, what we called a soft plan, to go ahead with this and start looking for land and buying land. So very, very quickly it happened. And it happened very quickly because the brother was okay with it. I was okay with it. My father was definitely all for it. He was driving it. My mother eventually came around. In terms of, she was too worried about the boys always fighting and breaking up the whole family, which is the worst case in any farm succession, and that's what she was really protective of.
She wanted to keep the peace, right?
Typical. Sorry, I'm not talking about all gender roles, but within our family, our mother is the peacemaker, and so she was very keen for that. And once we all sort of got on board and realised that it could actually work, but this could work, then we started to move in that format. Parents started looking at land. We bought another little block of land right next door, which ended up becoming more of my brother's side of the farm. And then my brother decided once that land was secured, he would come back and start project managing, which is what his career had been, the conversion of a brand new farm. So there was already an existing dairy shed on. It was a 60-bale rotary, and we decided, in the essence, to be fair, to build another 60-bale rotary. And so brother came back and started project managing that entire development. Little did we know at that time, the parents were setting up two identical farm units to give two brothers competing against each other at the same time, that they would be the other 50% of a 50% profit share with either brother, which is in essence a genius stroke, because then they got to fuel the fire of competition a little bit. And every time they fueled the fire of competition and we rose to the challenge, they got to reap the rewards on both sides. And
it allowed you to kind of express your own unique management style at the same time.
Yeah, yes. If you touched on something very interesting, because I love my brother, and I will not say exactly what we call him, but he's married a Scotsman, and that suits him well because he does seem to have short arms and deep pockets, that man. But in a loving way, he's a lot more conservative on spending costs and a bit more risk adverse. I'm very, very for risk. I like taking risks. I'll spend money if I think it's going to make me anything. And ultimately, long story short, we turned our farm succession board that we created as we were going through this process into a farm strategy meeting board, or a farm advisory board. So where we all had to report, and we have to hand in our budgets every year to make sure with the banks that we're still going in a positive way. That was in some format to tell the bankers that we are running good businesses, and in the future you should invest with us. You should hand the debt over into our hands, into the boys' hands. But anyway, we had to put in our budgets for this, and my brother would have a lot less milk production and a lot less number of costs, and I'd have a lot more milk production and a lot less cost. And the overall profit number would come out within about a couple $1,000s of each other every single year. And it was a very different way of producing the same amount of profit, different ways. I run more cows, I run more risk, I spent a lot more money, and he run a lot more efficient system for many years. And slowly over time, we started trying to attack each other's strengths and weaknesses and develop their own style. So it was a very awesome and unique way of improving individual skills.
Yep.
At the same time, and I think this is understood within a succession environment, at the same way as profiteering for my parents, who are the most important people getting out of that. When you're a kid going through it, you think about yourself.
Right.
And my brother's thinking about himself. And my parents found a way to use our competitive drive, our competitive spirit to help them and to drive the whole business forward, and also their exit forward. And very useful when it can be done. It's not available for every person, and I know that some of your listeners will say, but there's two boys and they both wanted to farm and you had a big farm. That was easy. And the answer is yes, it is easy. It ended up being a very simple solution and simple strategy, but it doesn't mean it's ever easy. Right. And I think that's an important part we need to talk to people about, is that it's constantly a journey.
Yeah.
And there will always be roadblocks along the way. And then as long as you can keep your eye on the end of that tunnel, then everyone can come out in their own version of success.
Right. Well, I mean, in your case, like you were saying, it's a relatively simple succession plan with two of you, and yet you're now into year 11 or 12 of it, from really when it started.
Yeah, from when we started.
It hasn't really stopped.
From when we started the conversation, no. So we in 2023, in August of 23, we just finally decided that was time for the two boys to buy their own respective pieces of land from the parents. So essentially that comprised of surrendering over the debt amount. So the debt from the bank, we still had a relatively large family debt. And so the boys taking over a certain amount of debt and a family loan. So a loan that will be paid back on a 1% to 2% interest rate to the parents every year as a form of pension. They won't like me calling it a form of pension, but it is a form of pension. And that 1% or 2% rate is negotiable 6 months in advance. So if they need more for any reason, they can do that. And we also have a structure, while we're on the topic, we also have a structure in which if they need to draw down money from the family loan. So myself personally, I have about just over 3 million New Zealand dollars in a family loan to them. In US dollars, it's about 1.6 million US dollars in family loan to the parents. And I pay interest on that at a 1% rate. Because interest rates are going up, we're talking about that going to 1.5 for the next season. So from basically now, from June 2024 until May 25, we're talking about that going to 1.5%, and it can go up to 2% is the maximum it can go up to. If the parents suddenly have a need to take more of that family loan down, to draw more of that loan away, if it's over $10,000 New Zealand, then they need to give that. They can call that at any time. So if it's for an emergency surgery or something like that, they can call that money at any time. If it's over between $10,000 and $100,000, they need to give us 2 months notice. And if it's over $500,000, they need to give us 6 months notice. And if it's over $1 million, we need more than a year's notice to draw that money down. And those numbers are in New Zealand dollars. We understand that we run businesses that are able to generate cash, but with enough time, we can actually make it work, and not in a way where it can completely hurt the business, hurt the quality or the success of the business.
Right.
So that seemed to us to be a pretty fair way in which to do it. The other half of that is I have personally on my side, I have about $6 million of New Zealand dollars of debt to the bank, in which I pay the interest rate. And in August 23, when we first signed up, the interest rate was about 8.34%. So high enough, but our budgets were able to justify that we could pay that, and we were safe enough. Over 10 years, we'd built up enough goodwill within the bank. We'd kept the same bank the whole way. I don't hope our bank doesn't mind me saying that we bank with Rabobank, and they tend, in New Zealand context, they only invest in farming and agribusiness related products. So we'd built up enough goodwill that they were prepared to lend to us, and lend to us without huge amount of security. The security that we currently had built up over that 10 years was enough for us to have that and the family loans, and still be viewed as enough of an asset that we could be borrowed to on an outright basis. So, have a fairly sizable interest rate bill to pay, but I also have a fairly solid and reliable milk income stream to be able to pay for that. There's always risks in business, but that is the cost of doing business. There's going to be risk either way.
Right. So one question I have for you, your parents, obviously you said at the beginning of the interview, they never really left the farm, right? They spent a lot of time. Well, they left the farm once in a while, but they were very involved in the farm. What does that look like today, and how did that transition process take place?
So I'll probably talk back from 2013. So, and then I'll try and do this quickly. Again, it may take longer than required. In 2013, we bought this brand new block of land to put the second dairy parlour on, and my brother to come back and project manage. As soon as we bought that piece of land, we went back and borrowed again, and we bought them another block, which was pretty much neighbouring to my side of the land. So my brother was on the west side, and this is on the east side of the original block, which is about 10 kilometres from side to side. We're about 6 miles from side to side. So we bought a block there of about 64 hectares, which is about 150 acres. And we bought that for them with the same family debt, with the same family loan. The plan was, my parents finally decided after many times I said at the very beginning what are the 3 questions that they liked. One of the things they really enjoyed doing was rearing young stock, and that was what really got them out of bed, and they really enjoyed it. And they liked being able to control that process all the way through. They don't really like rearing cows when they're on the bottle, but once they've got towards the end of a bottle, weaned towards and coming back into the herd, that was their favourite time.
Okay.
And so we found that there was a really good way to monetize that within our own business, which is to, with that 64 hectare or 150 acre block, me and my brother would both put both of our young stock there. They would run through their farm. So, we paid them a contract rearing rate. So they would rear our cows for us, which was not their favourite pastime, but they did it for us for 8 years. So we're very, very thankful. They were very good at their job. And then they would also rear those cows from weaning until, for a start, until they were got to 2 years old and came back into the herd. So they would mate. We would do the first mating over the first heifers on the block, and then they would come back onto the farm. After a couple of years, my cousin, who's about the same age as me, on a also neighbouring property. This is New Zealand after all, and people don't really move too far away. But neighbouring property, they were starting to go through their own transition, and they needed a bit more cash to be generated. So their family came to our family and asked us, would we be able to start sending our what we call R2 heifers? So from month number
13.
Yeah, month number 13 until they come back into the herd.
Yep.
Could they go to there and we could pay a contract rate to there? My parents graciously decided at that point that they could do that, although it would change their business a little bit, but they saw the benefit of helping out another family as well. So they made a decision that it wouldn't quite be as much on the top for them, but it would help out, at that point, my father's brother. And so we decided to do that. So they were very gracious in that as well. But then our stock, so it goes stock from the first year with my parents, the second year they go with my uncle and auntie and now my cousin, and then they come back into us as in-calf, in-milk heifers, and we milk them on the dairy platform. So that's how it works for us. Now, the parents have been able to, that's what it started with. They got to that point within, where they stopped doing the heifers in about 2018. And in 2023, we decided that we were going to take all the debt off that land. So they have rights to all of that land, the 150 acres plus another 60 acres, completely debt-free. And so they get the opportunity to farm that. We still pay them an income. We always paid them a fair market rate, so they always had a fair level of income. And now they have an asset that is sitting there generating them cash and some capital value they can still sell back to us in the future year. Now, we have a first right of refusal on that land. So whether we decide we want it or we can sell it to somebody else is our decision down the line. So that's very interesting. And then the last point that I'll touch on with where they've gone to now is that you can take farmers out of farming, but they still like risk. Like, that's part of the reason they went dairy farming in the first place. It's part of the reason that everyone got into farming and went through really tough times. And so they've currently got this land and they've got no debt on it, and they look at it as an asset and they want to invest again. After we've bought them all out, they want to come back in with us and find something else to invest in, which is just a testament to what good, in my mindset, good succession is that after it's all said and done, people want to go back into it in a different setting. Obviously, it would be as a company on the side,
right?
But to go do something else because they realise that we have a lot of skills that can all work well together, and we did manage to get through this well together with time.
Well, it's a testament that your businesses that have been created out of it are viable businesses that are good investment opportunities, right? That kind of, you prove the point that, yeah, we do know what we're doing. We do run a good business.
Yeah, and I suppose a little bit of the youngest, the siblings, and also especially the youngest sibling being me, is, yes, you want to prove your viability. That's really important. But that, yeah, part of that, and I don't want to get lost into this too much, is that we talked a lot when we were going through this whole farm advisory board, farm succession board, and even before the very first meetings about the family pie. And I know a lot of people talk about that, and it's a real simple concept, is that we talk about the farm and the land and everybody as the family pie, and we all say, let's get in behind each other together and build it. And then ultimately everybody gets a bigger slice. So we very, very much, we decided that was going to be our policy. And once you leave that, you actually feel like you've left behind an enormous opportunity as well. You feel like we did decide in 2023 to split the pie and take our own sections.
Okay.
And now we sort of miss that collective buying power. And because part of us are wanting to say, well, what can we do to use a bit of that? And particularly from my parents' point, so my father's just turned 61 and my mother's 59. The banks don't view them as the same asset. They have land sitting there without any debt, and they want to do something, and the banks are saying, well, but how are you going to service this? We don't.
Right. Where's the cash flow that's going to service the debt off of it?
Where's the cash flow? The retirement age is 65 to 67 in most countries. We're 65. And, you've only got a very short time to pay this loan back. So they view them with a different portfolio. So they want to use us as the face so they can then drive the business that they still want to do. And they still are driven towards, doing something and challenging themselves, which is, I think, going more into my Nuffield stuff. So using that as the example, that's what a lot of what I see that people really struggle with is when you're farming, you've got a constant reason to get up in the morning and you're constantly motivated and driven to do stuff. Some people are driven by debt. Some people are driven by the want to be better. Some people just love being with their cows. There's so many reasons in which to do it.
Yeah.
And then once you then pass over succession, no one talks about how difficult it is to suddenly have no driving force. And I've seen a lot of people who have just passed this on and who are a bit lost. And
they lose that sense of purpose.
They do lose a sense of purpose. And it's really interesting because at no point does farm succession mean that the older generation can't continue to work.
Right.
Or I believe that that's something that is a bit of a mind block that a lot of people have. It's different in different countries. I'm not going to call them out, but I know that we visited some of them where that difference is just a complete mind block.
Yeah.
And there's no reason for that to actually be a mind block. You can still get paid a wage long after you pass over the asset, especially if you've still got information and a lot of technical experience and expertise in these areas. We're actually silly if we let these people go. We should not be incentivizing them to walk. We should be incentivizing them to pass over. Now, with many families, different for everybody, that comes with a lot of opinions that you didn't ask for, but that everyone needs to have a level of maturity to approach those when they come.
Yeah.
And that's how it works. So
and a lot of that really boils down to how well you communicate with each other and communicating those things up front and having that expectation up front.
And I will say that from my partner and my brother's partner coming in, they do say that our family is sick because we communicate so well. We have big open discussions around the table.
Very transparent.
A very transparent family. And that has definitely been a huge help, but that does not mean it's smooth.
Right.
And going to what I've seen in the Nuffield, and especially around this topic, is very, very basically a lot of people don't have hobbies outside farming, and especially people in their, and I don't want to be ageist here, but people in their 40s, 50s and 60s, they don't have a hobby outside of day-to-day farming. They've made it their entire existence and they don't know who they would be without it.
They made it their identity.
It has completely become their identity as a person. And there's nothing wrong with that. You're currently talking to a 33-year-old man who farming on the farm is my identity. And because I've highlighted this, I know it needs to change, but I've got time to work at that and to develop a hobby. And I do think that's an important part for people in their 30s, 40s and 50s and even younger, is to make sure that you have a healthy balance in which you can have a hobby, because that's going to be really vital in the future years when you go to start trying to pass that farm on. You need something that ideally you can scale up over time. I mean, if you like to hit the occasional golf ball, we need to get you to a stage where you can play 3 to 4 times a week later in life, if that's what you want to do. But if that's not what you want to do, that's fine. But so I talk to a lot of people and I say, what are your hobbies? And they say it's farming. And sometimes you have to be very polite and try and say, but don't you think you should find another hobby? And sometimes when you say that to farmers, that's the biggest kick in the teeth that you can offer them. It's the biggest gut shot. But that's all I've ever known. That's all I've ever been. And how the farm looks is how I look. That is a very much a part of it. And it is going to be very interesting to see how that progresses, because definitely the future generations and younger people prioritize their time a lot more, and they prioritize their health a lot more and their mental health. And it'll be very interesting to see how this goes with the in terms of some individual family succession and also farm succession. As we know, the cows don't milk themselves, apart from I see some cows here going through a robot and trying to milk themselves. But a farm's do not stop. They go every day, and they need constant attention. My cows do not milk themselves. I have to have a good level of staff to be able to do that.
All right, so Peter, let's go back to your travels. I mean, you've been traveling for what you said, over 160 days so far this year. What are the biggest takeaways that you've learned? I guess let's start out. How many countries have you visited? Where have you been? And then what are the big takeaways that you're going to go home with when you fly back home this week?
Very good question. Now, trying to count the countries, some of them are twice. I've been repeat jobs to a few countries that me and Paul visited initially, and then I went back to because it sparked an interest that I had to go revisit. I've been around the central Midwest of America to Brazil. Then we went to Germany. We went to Ireland, both the north and the south. Then I did go home for 2 weeks, which was a very interesting experience in the middle of a global travel. Anyway, I think I might have learned more at home than I did anywhere else. Then went to England, then shot down to Italy, went back to Wales, then went down to Portugal and into Spain, so that's 9. Then went to Scotland, and Scotland, through into France and Belgium and to the Netherlands, and then to Canada, and then back to here to Michigan. So I think that means I'm up to 13 or 14.
Yep.
Again, still struggle to count. That's been an awesome experience. Majority seeing a lot of farming on our what is the Global Focus Program tour, where there was 12 of us initially. One didn't come, so there's 11.
Yep.
We toured all farming types, very broad spectrum.
20 sectors, I think I had counted at one point.
It would have been 20 sectors. And agriculture. And agriculture and agricultural production and agricultural business.
Yep.
A really awesome and fascinating insight. We also got into the policy space in at least 2 countries. So seeing a lot of things and often trying to pinpoint what was really good and what was really interesting is can be a challenge. But I suppose from putting on the farming lens, I find what the Netherlands are doing really fascinating. This is a people who I love because they saw the ocean and they just decided, no, I'm not going to let that control me. I'm not going to let that beat me. I'm going to beat it. And I went on to a fellow Nuffield scholar's place, his parents' place, and it is 7 meters below sea level. And it is an amazing, amazing space. It's an amazing space, really fascinating. You think 7 meters below sea level, there's going to be constant waterways like every couple of meters. That's not the truth. It's quite spaced out. You can have 10 hectares in a paddock. Very interesting. And how they farm is all from what was cost spent before in capital, because in the 60s and 70s, that land was turned over. So it's now worth an incredible amount of money. Most of the farms were bought by the government, and so they were sold. If they were sold at all, a lot of them are still run by companies, government structures. So the local municipality would own the land, and they would give out lease and rental rates to certain farmers in that area. Because that capital is still being owned, and when it is occasionally sold, it's sold at a very high rate. The amount of intensification those farmers have to do on that land to justify the cost of what it is to have got it there in the first place is really fascinating. And it makes them, in their own format, in a country with lots of subsidies, they have to be their foot on the pulse very much of what's going on, and they are quick to try and change their cropping. There's a lot of cropping. They also do mixed cropping, so they have cropping outside and cows indoors in a very controlled, very intense system. And I find that because of history, they've been forced into a way that if you or I were going there, Paul, from different countries with different backgrounds, we wouldn't be motivated to farm in the same way. And a lot of the really fascinating bits of all my travel is you see probably a form of history really does dictate how people act now. And a country like little old me in New Zealand, where we grow pastoral-based dairy farming, graze in situ, it's very confronting for us to see. But it's farmed that way for a reason, and it works for a reason. And the Netherlands was a very interesting place to really challenge my own, as another American Nafioda said to me, my own temperate bias. You see, you're an incredible temperate bias because you're Kiwis. And he's right. So that was very, very good. And having that challenge of your own mindset has been probably the most moving thing for me and what I will do going forward. It's probably allowed me to understand better farming types, better or different, whichever way you look at it, and also understand the ability of what people can do or what the individuals. As a New Zealander, I love my country, but we work very, very hard and often too hard, too many hours. And then your ability to look outside your business for growth is then limited because of that and personal investment that you're putting in. Sometimes getting outside of your business is the best way to see it in a format to grow it. And this Nuffield is an amazing opportunity to do that. I have often said to people, it's like sitting outside of your life with a bird's eye view, looking down upon your life while everyone else continues to run completely normally, and you get to see where you're going to fit back in. And that's going to be a challenge. So
going back, you set your business up to be able to do this, right?
Yes.
Now you're going back home after being gone for so long. What are some of the things that you're seeing that you're probably going to have to change as you go back into your daily life at home?
Very good question, and still a question that I'm constantly grappling with myself. I have an incredible team behind me, behind the farm, but behind me as well. Cohen, Cullen, and Isaac are the three boys who work for me, three young Kiwi men, and they are awesome, and they're doing an awesome job on the farm. I couldn't do this without them, and the truth is, when I go back, they have all stepped up and their capability and their responsibility and the care that they've taken. And so when I go back, it's going to be a huge personal challenge for me, but I need to go back not as I left, I'm going to have to fit into a different management class and much more of an owner-operator space, which is not where I left. I left as a hands-on manager in with everybody, and now I go back as an owner-operator space. So this is going to be a very tough personal challenge. What my boys will say to me, what Cohen especially will say to me is, this is time for you to go write your report. We've got this. And in some small format as well, it's a different scale to full farm succession, but this is a similar issue to what people go through at a different stage. Everyone's a bit terrified of the unknown. I'm going back into the unknown, and you can look at that as a challenge or an opportunity. And I'm going to choose to take it as an opportunity, and an opportunity to change, to focus on the parts of my business I like, to focus on the bits that I maybe would look at changing, to look at other opportunities, to expand my mind and horizons, and to network with other people. And this is all the parts of what the Nuffield's supposed to do. I'm sure that this is what the dream result of what they want when they send people out to go build the world, is to come back and realize, okay, now things have to be different. Now you've seen more than most, and now things need to change. So I'm also incredibly lucky that 2 years ago I put in this Halter collar system. So it's a virtual wireless collar system. And I've been able to see, I thought when I first went away, I can see on my phone, I can see where the cows are, I can see where they're being moved, I can see how much they're being fed, and all of that. I've got another app where I can see the milking rate, and I thought that I was going to have to be constantly calling home and getting in the way, saying, what are you guys doing? This is going wrong. And the truth is I only had to do that twice. And the second time I didn't really need to do it. With technology and with game, what they have been able to do and the decisions they've been able to make have really shown me that me being out there was the best thing for not just me, it was the best thing for the team. And now going back into that team, I need to make sure that we don't just revert to the old ways.
Yeah, well, that's great advice. Well, Peter, it's been a pleasure having you as a travel companion. Not only did we do the GFP, we did the 6 weeks of the GFP. We did the week in Canada together at the IFMA conference, which just got released here not long ago. and then this week here in Michigan. So it's been a pleasure having you as a travel companion and be able to show you a little bit of how farming works here in Michigan.
And I very much look forward to the chance to host you and your family when you come over to New Zealand. And yeah, it's just an awesome opportunity. And anyone thinking about a Nuffield, don't think about it anymore. Put your name out there. It is, if you're thinking that you could do it, you can probably do it.
Yep.
So.
Yep. Well, great. Well, thank you so much, Peter. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much for listening to another great episode of AgCulture Podcast with Peter Templeton from the South Island of New Zealand. If you'd like to reach out to Peter, we'll have his information in the show notes. And as always, if you found this valuable, please share it with somebody that you know. That's how we grow the audience here at AgCulture Podcast. Check out our YouTube channel with all of our clips of stuff that's going on with our guests, as well as my personal travels around the world, learning and diving into different things in agriculture. And until next time, I'm Paul Windemuller, and this has been the AgCulture Podcast.